Hi, everyone. Breaking tonight, the Justice Department announces it is opposing the public release of the affidavit which the FBI search warrant on Mar-a-Lago was based on. They say it will, quote, cause significant and irreparable damage to this ongoing criminal investigation. It contains, among other critically important and detailed investigative facts, highly sensitive information about witnesses, including witnesses interviewed by the government, specific investigative techniques. Now, I think this is the wrong decision. There has got to be a way for the Justice Department to put significant portions of the affidavit out there without compromising the investigation. If there has ever been an affidavit that's in the public interest, it's this one. The affidavit itself would most importantly lay out the case that prosecutors made to the judge that there was probable cause that evidence of a crime could be found at Mar-a-Lago. But in the motion filed late today, the DOJ argues that, quote, if disclosed, the affidavit would serve as a roadmap to the government's ongoing investigation, providing specific details about its direction and likely course in a manner that is highly likely to compromise future investigative steps. Disclosure of the government's affidavit at this stage would also likely chill future cooperation by witnesses whose assistance may be sought as this investigation progresses, as well as in other high-profile investigations. Key word there being ongoing investigation. Look, it is true that typically the DOJ would not release this sort of document during an investigation. But this is not your typical case. The motion also confirms the reporting that a grand jury's been investigating the former president's handling of classified documents, and the DOJ makes it clear that it doesn't want to risk the cooperation of witnesses if their identities were to get out. So why not redact the witness names and identifying information? Instead, the DOJ is asking for a blanket ban on the public getting any of this information. And they go even further. Quote, in addition to the implications for the investigation, the release of this type of investigative material could have devastating consequences for the reputations and rights of individuals whose actions and statements are described. Now, presumably that includes Donald Trump, who may be the one under investigation here, but almost certainly whose actions and statements are being described. And yes, that is one of the reasons prosecutors don't release this kind of stuff, typically in order to protect the person under investigation or others when charges have not been filed. And I completely understand and respect that. But in this case, Trump himself said even before the release of the search warrant last week, quote, release the documents. And many top Republicans have been vocal on this topic too.
Was there unprecedented justification? That remains an open question, and we know exactly where to look, and that is the affidavit of probable cause, the one document that remains under seal.
Well, we have a number of concerns, Brianna. Obviously, one is whether or not the raid itself was justified. We have this list from the FBI, but we don't have conclusive as to whether or not this actually is classified material and whether or not it rises to the level of the highest classified material.
I think it's very important long term for the Justice Department, now that they've done this, that they show that this was not just a fishing expedition, that they had due cause to go in and to do this, that they did exhaust all other means. And if they can't do that, then we've got a serious problem on our hands.
But the DOJ insists in its filing that redacting names and sensitive information simply won't work. They say, quote, redactions that would be so extensive as to render the document devoid of content that would meaningfully enhance the public's understanding of these. There is simply no alternative to sealing that would prevent the inevitable efforts to read between the lines and discern the identities of certain individuals, dates, or other critical case-specific information. But you can't try. There's nothing more from that affidavit to release. Not the part about the spring grand jury subpoena seeking the return of classified information to Mar-a-Lago. That part's been reported. Or the FBI meeting with Trump's attorneys there in June, surveying the area where some documents were being kept. Trump's own lawyers told NewsNation about that. The DOJ is saying that they won't oppose certain disclosures connected to the warrant, like a cover sheet and some of the legal filings, but that doesn't tell us much. Releasing the affidavit, yes, a redacted version, could put to rest some questions over why the Florida magistrate signed off on the search. It could confirm efforts the FBI made prior to going to the extreme length of converging on a former president's private home, and why the judge agreed with justice officials that such extreme measures were necessary. Now, there's even a bipartisan effort from the Senate Intelligence Committee asking for more transparency from the DOJ. But this is specifically related to what they found, not necessarily the affidavit. Over the weekend, Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia and Republican Marco Rubio of Florida sent a private letter to the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, and Attorney General Garland. In a statement to Axios about it, Rubio said, quote, "In his remarks last week, Attorney General Garland claimed there was a substantial public interest in the execution of an unprecedented search warrant on President Trump. As such, the Intelligence Committee has asked the Department of Justice to share with us on a classified basis the specific intelligence documents seized from Mar-a-Lago." Doesn't make sense, it does. And on CBS Sunday, even Democrat Adam Schiff, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, says he, along with Democrat Carolyn Maloney, the House Oversight Committee chair, have sent a letter to the Director of National Intelligence asking what exactly was in those documents the Fed seized.
I have asked for, along with Chairman Maloney, a damage assessment by the intelligence community and a briefing to Congress.
Will you get one? Have you heard from the Director of National Intelligence?
I have not heard back yet, but I'm confident we will get one, and I'm confident the intelligence community will do a damage assessment that is, I think, fairly routine when there has been the potential risk of disclosure of national security information or classified information.
Maybe. Maybe Rubio will get what he's asking for. Maybe Schiff will get what he's asking for. Those are first steps. But many supporters of the former president have been accusing the FBI of all sorts of impropriety, including even evidence planting. And while there's no evidence to support it, it is an extraordinary measure to search the former president's home. And we all deserve some more answers. More damage will be done the longer the public is left in the dark. The not knowing will continue to erode the public trust. For example, we now have confirmation that there's an ongoing criminal investigation. But was that their number one concern, the possible crimes, or was it getting the documents back? Perhaps moderate Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, who's no friend of Trump, put it best on ABC's This Week.
I was not one of the people that was just reacting, just defending Donald Trump, but I understood that without anyone understanding what this was about, that it was going to and could lead to even further division and angry rhetoric from both sides.
Joining me now, former federal prosecutor Sarah Krissoff, who has worked under both Republican and Democratic administrations, and May Mailman, who was, among many other roles in the Trump administration, Associate White House Counsel. Thanks to both of you for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Sarah, let me start with you. I believe that you think the DOJ has gotten it right here. Tell me why.
I do. I find their papers on this pretty compelling. I understand the desire to review the information, but there are very sound reasons to keep the materials sealed, and the department goes through those reasons at length in its brief. I mean, I think really most importantly here is protecting the investigation. This is just sort of one point in an ongoing investigation. We don't know how many tentacles that investigation may have. And releasing the affidavit, even in a redacted format, and frankly, I doubt whether it could be effectively redacted, could reveal investigative techniques. It could reveal sort of key information about sources and threaten the safety of those sources, frankly. It could reveal grand jury information.
It could, and that's the argument, as you know, prosecutors make in every case, right? In every case, if there's a motion made by the media or whoever to release a search warrant affidavit, it's the same responses in every case. And it's possible that some of those things are at play here. But it does seem to me that also that these documents are presumptively public, meaning the government has to keep going back and filing a motion to keep them under seal. Because there is this presumption that when the government is doing things, that the public has a right to know it. And it just seems to me that this case is different. And to sort of talk about it like it's any other case, right? Well, it's an ongoing investigation. It could, jeopardize sources, et cetera. To me, that really misses a very, very significant point here, that it's the former president of the United States.
To me, it's actually important to view it similarly as other cases, because if we take this case out of how the DOJ handles all of the other cases, Like, why does I understand that the compelling public interest
is greater
here? You have a stronger public interest, no doubt, and so that factor, when you're, the law sets forth sort of a balancing test the courts must look at when they're deciding whether or not to unseal documents, and one of those factors is the public interest, and there's no question here there is a strong public interest for viewing this information. That said, I think the other factors still weigh against the unsealing, and in fact, I think by arguing for unsealing, you're actually, in some ways, I understand your point about that that you think that it would sort of legitimize the process by having access to the information, but I actually worry it would destabilize and delegitimize the criminal justice process by allowing sort of what would be very unprecedented to have an unsealing of a search warrant affidavit midstream of an investigation prior to any charges being brought.
Well, but again, May Mailman, in a lot of cases, they don't bring charges, right? And so at some point, these kinds of documents can and often should be made public.
Yeah, so, I think it's important, as you've sort of noted, which is the parties are not on an even playing field here. The public starts with the presumption of getting the documents, and then it's up to the party who's trying to hide the documents to explain its compelling interest, why it should be hidden. And, you just have to remember, they're trying to hide something. Like, I think the public can't forget that, and that really is important, because that's going to cast a shadow over everything that happens next. Now, I think the news organizations who are trying to get access to the documents make a good point, which is that DOJ has already admitted there's a huge public interest here because it already asked to unseal the warrant. And DOJ responds, well, the warrant is different because, one, the search had already occurred, and two, Trump's lawyers had a copy of it. What? Those don't seem really relevant to the public interest. And so I really think, when they say, oh, this is about protecting witnesses, as you said, that can be redacted. This is about grand jury information. DOJ's already leaked half of that to Newsweek.
Well, here's the thing, though, but May, the area where I may disagree with you is I don't think it's bad faith on their part to not want to disclose this, right? I think it's just sort of the typical way that the Department of Justice behaves in all of these cases, and they're saying we want to apply the same standard here. I'm saying you shouldn't apply the same standard here because this case is a really big deal, right?
This case is a really big deal because we don't even know what questions to ask, right? If this is about presidential records, then what are you doing? If this is about national security, then why did it take so long? If this is about something else, and I think, yes, maybe there are other investigations we don't know about, and that information needs to not be public. That can be redacted. What was the basis? What was the basis for this?
It just seems to me they're not trying. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.